All right, let's break down two of the absolute bedrock concepts in the database world, schema and instance. Once you really get the difference here, how databases are designed and managed suddenly makes a whole lot more sense. Okay, let's jump right in. So you've got this database, right? And it's holding just mountains of information. How in the world does it keep everything straight? Well, it really boils down to two big ideas. There's a permanent, solid plan, and then there's a temporary, always changing snapshot of the data that lives inside that plan.
And these two things, the plan and the snapshot, they're basically the two essential sides of any database system. They are totally connected, of course, but they do completely different jobs. Let's pull them apart and see what they're all about.
So first up, we've got the schema. And honestly, the best way, the absolute perfect way to think about a schema is as the architectural blueprint for the whole database. It's the master plan. A schema is all about the design and the structure. It's really important to get this. It doesn't contain any of the actual data itself, not a single piece. Instead, it just lays down the rules. What kind of data is allowed, what it should look like, and how all the different parts relate to each other. Okay, take a look at this. This empty employee table, this is a schema in its purest form. See, there's no data yet, but it clearly defines the structure. It's basically saying, hey, for any employee you add, I'm going to need a name, an ID, an address, and a contact number. No exceptions. So what the schema really does is act like a logical map for the whole database. It shows you how different things, maybe like a course table and a student table, are actually connected. And having this clear structure is what lets us find, add, or change data so fast, because the database isn't guessing, it's following that blueprint. And just so you know, it gets a little more complex. Schemas can exist on three different levels. There's the physical level, which is all about how the data is actually stored on a hard drive. Then there's the logical level, which is the blueprint we've been talking about. And finally, the view level, which is kind of like a custom, simplified version for a specific user. Okay, let's switch gears to our second concept. So if the schema is the permanent blueprint, then the instance is the snapshot. Think of it like a photograph of the database, captured at one specific moment. To put it simply, an instance is just the actual data sitting in the database at any given point. This isn't the structure anymore. This is the real information that's filling up that structure. Hey, remember that empty employee table from a minute ago? The schema? Well, look at it now. Boom, it's filled with data. This is an instance. At this exact moment in time, the table holds the records for Chaitanya and Ajit. This collection of data is the database's current instance. And here's the huge difference. Unlike the schema, which is pretty static, an instance is incredibly dynamic. It's alive. It changes constantly. Every single time someone adds a new person, updates an address, or deletes a record, the instance of that database shifts. Let's use another quick example to hammer this home. Imagine a student table. Right now, the instance of our database might show that there are exactly 100 student records. That's our snapshot for today. But what about tomorrow? Let's say 100 new students enroll overnight. Now the instance is changed. The new snapshot shows 200 records. But notice, the underlying schema, the structure for what makes a student, hasn't changed one bit. The instance, though, is completely different. Okay, so we've looked at both sides of the coin. Now let's put them right next to each other. This is where it's all going to click into place. So let's line them up. On one side, you've got the schema. That's the blueprint. It's the logical design, it defines all the rules, and it's static. It almost never changes. On the other side, you've got the instance. That's the snapshot. It's the actual data at this very moment, and it's super dynamic. It's changing all the time. Blueprint versus snapshot. Simple as that.
All right, so you might be thinking, blueprint, snapshot, I get it, but why does this really matter? What's the big deal? Well, turns out this separation is pretty much the foundation of all modern database management.
It really all comes down to efficiency and keeping your data safe. Because you have that clear schema, that map, it helps the database and us understand how all the different pieces of data are related. And because that blueprint is so clear, running operations becomes incredibly fast and efficient. You're not just searching around in the dark, you're following a map.
And that is the ultimate takeaway here, this separation, this idea of splitting the stable, unchanging blueprint from the messy, ever-changing data. That's what makes databases so incredibly powerful and reliable. It gives you stability and flexibility at the same time. It stops the rules from changing with every new piece of data, which would be total chaos.
And that brings us to a final thought. This really powerful model, A fixed blueprint versus a changing snapshot, it's not just for databases. Where else in our work, or even in our lives, do we use this exact same concept to manage complexity and keep things from falling apart? It's something to think about. Thanks for tuning into this explainer.